In today's video, we are talking about the quilted petticoat. It was a garment worn by all social classes for warmth, but it was also another place that one could show off your wealth. The cheaper fabrics and simpler quilting designs were usually worn under other skirts to fill out the silhouette. But those who could afford it wore petticoats of silk and satin that were beautifully decorated with finely quilted designs of flowers, geometric shapes, animals, or even mermaids. Today, I'm going to be trying my hand at quilting my own petticoat for my maternity series, but first I need to come up with a design. So, looking in costumes of detail, on page 21 there is a quilted jacket and matching petticoat from 1745 to 1755. It was made for a stout woman of medium height, and according to this, the circumference is 160 inches. Because I am definitely a stout woman, I am leaning more towards going for like 150-160 inches. I am going to be splitting up into panels, and so each repeat is going to be 25 inches wide, which means my fabric will be about 28 inches wide when I cut it. So that gives me seam allowance and it gives me room for shrinkage. I think I've given myself, well, I know I haven't given myself enough time for this project because I am just getting into quilting on a machine. I'm going to keep it a little bit more simple. I'm also going to be pulling inspiration from the maternity petticoat from Colonial Williamsburg, and that one, the material goes quite up high over the bump. I measured above my bump down to the floor, and I'm giving myself extra room because I know the quilting will make the fabric shrink a little bit, but at this point I have figured out that I think I want each panel to be 52 inches long by 28 inches wide. I really like this design, but there are a couple other designs on page 24 and 25 that I really like that I think I can incorporate into something that is a little bit simpler for me to quilt. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And then once that is figured out, I can play around on my machine and see how easy it is to quilt up. So yeah, let's get started. When drawing up my design, I first created a smaller scale of each panel, and from there I pulled inspiration from my books and online to create a fairly simple quilting pattern. The swooping feather design was something I came across quite frequently, and the floral design was also quite popular. Also, just a heads up, you may hear little grunting noises throughout this voiceover as my son is sitting on my lap while I'm filming this. Once my pattern was drawn up, I cut out the petticoat panels. As I mentioned before, my panels are 52 inches long by 28 inches wide. This gives me about 6 inches of room from the top and the bottom, and 3 inches from side to side. This turned out to be complete overkill, but I'm much happier that I had too much fabric rather than too little. Once my fabric was cut into panels, I then pinned the sides of the panels together to create 3 sections of fabric for the front and 3 for the back, and this made them much easier to work with when I was quilting. With the panels sewn together, I then began sandwiching my petticoat layers. First the fashion fabric, then for the second layer a layer of cotton batting, and thirdly a layer of cotton broadcloth. Historically, a wool would have been used in place of the cotton batting. Once everything was layered, I pinned the edges and along the seams to keep things from shifting, and then basted the layers together along the seams so I wouldn't have to worry about or deal with the pins during the quilting stage. With both sides of the petticoat prepped for quilting, it was time to transfer the design to the fabric. I created a large template to transfer the design over more easily so it would be more consistent across the petticoat. To create the notches in the pattern, I used a pattern notcher, and this just helped to keep everything lined up. Using a friction pen, I transferred the design to the fabric. Now, I get this comment a lot on the videos that I shouldn't be using friction pens on the exterior of garments, as the ink can reappear if the fabric gets too cold. Personally, I haven't had issues with that happening, but as always, if you're following one of my videos, test your fabric first to make sure it works for you. I interrupt this video with a little bit of a story time. I had an incident with a curb last week, and that incident has left me with 5 broken bones in my foot. So there's that. So what does that mean for this video? Well, because I am essentially housebound, because I have to go down a flight of stairs to get out of the house and I have issues doing that, I am gonna continue with this project, but I'm gonna continue with trying to use my left foot. I finished quilting the back of the petticoat, so that's good. I know I can at least do it, but now I get to try and train my brain to do the free motion with my left foot, since I can't actually put any weight on my right foot. So yeah. This is gonna be fun. I don't know if I'm actually gonna finish this entire project now before baby comes. The emergency doctor said that I'm not allowed to put any weight on my foot for at least 2 weeks. More looking at like 3 or 4, just because of how bad the fracture is. I think it's 3 metatarsals and then 2 bones that the metatarsals attached to. So thankfully I didn't break every single metatarsal on my foot, because that would have really sucked. I am seriously contemplating making myself a bubble wrap suit as my next project, just with the amount of accidents that I have been in recently. I think that would probably be a good idea. Also, before I forget, my audio and visuals may be a little sketchy from here on out. We'll see how this goes, just because I can't get up and move the camera as often as I would probably like to. Unless I can wrangle my husband into helping me set up shots, it's probably just going to be stationary shots. So yeah, let's get back to the petticoat. If you watched my experimenting with free motion quilting video, you'll recognize pretty much all of these stitches. I, for one, am very glad that I took the time to experiment with getting the hang of free motion before starting on the actual project, as it gave me a lot more confidence when I was working on the real fabric. Now, the first section I worked on for my petticoat was the continuous feathers, as this was the most intense section of the petticoat, and it was really interesting learning when to sew the longer or shorter feathers to give the curved pattern a nice flowing look. I am really happy with how these came out in the end. It's kind of hard to see, but I got all the feathers on this one done last night, and now I can work on the next section. For the upper section of the petticoat, it consisted of lines and what I like to call clover flowers or figure 8 flowers. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my other free motion quilting video as well, but I found sewing these straight lines so much more difficult than sewing the curved lines or the wiggly lines when I was doing the free motion quilting. For the bottom of the petticoat, I decided to quilt one larger flower under the curve of the feathers and then join the flowers together with some curlicue vines. So the embroidery is finished on the second panel, and now it's time to put them together and then finish the little flower parts on the seams. And then I can go ahead and start doing everything else to finish this up. Okay, I have both my panels here, and in this book, Costumes Close Up, there is a section here where it tells you how their petticoats were seamed together. So this one's actually for a back seam, and then later on it mentions, essentially it uses the same seam for this one has a side seam, or the pocket openings. So this is the illustration that I'm going with. So I am now going to essentially replicate this for my petticoat. You can see I've kind of marked the lines here where my petticoat is supposed to start and finish. And then once this is all joined together, then I'm actually going to go in and finish these seams here because I didn't add the flowers to the side seams yet. So I have 1, 2, 3 flowers. I might not do this one because it just depends on how high it is for the pocket opening. So I may only have the 1 and the 2 on this side, and then the 1 and the 2 on the opposite side. So that is my goal for the evening, and we'll go from there. So I have the side seam sewn in place, and now I have to go in and trim all this funny business away, and then I can finish the edges of this. I trimmed back the seam allowance quite close to the seam, only 1 layer at a time, as I was slightly terrified I was going to cut through the wrong part and ruin the quilting that I had just spent hours doing. Also, instead of trying to replicate the finish from the book that I had shown earlier, I ended up just creating a felled seam instead, as it was much flatter and it was easier to quilt over that later on. With the seams finished on both sides, I added the figure 8 flowers to the side seams to finish the look. And then I finished the last of the quilting by adding several rows of stitching underneath the vine design for some extra hem stiffening. With that done, I then turned up the hem and gave it a good press. Instead of using a turn and turn hem, I added some 1/2 inch wide twill tape to the raw edge of the turned up hem and then hand stitched it in place for a nice clean finish. For the pocket openings, I trimmed back the excessively large seam allowance and then finished the opening with a turn and turned hem and hand stitched it in place.
With the inside of the petticoat done, all that was left was to pleat the petticoat and add the waist ties.
Alrighty, so I kind of got on a roll and I didn't realize my camera had stopped filming. So I've pleated the entire petticoat and I think it's looking pretty good. I might fix that little bit right there. But other than that, I think it looks pretty good. I'm very happy with how the quilting is looking and how all the flowers are lining up. If you look back at the front, the flowers kind of peek out at every pleat. So I really like how it turned out. This right here, I'm thinking it's how the padding is sitting right now on my mannequin. It's causing that kind of weird fold in it. I'm going to take it off and kind of baste it in place and then try it on and see if that fold is still there. And yeah, if it's not, then I'm going to go ahead and add the waistband.
As it turned out, the weird fold was from the padding on the mannequin, so I continued with my waist ties. I used a 1 1/4 inch wide twill tape that was double my waist length for the front and the back ties for my petticoat for a simple waistband. I just folded it in half over the top edge of the petticoat and stitched them in place. Now, this method for a waistband is very simple to change in the future if I decide to make the petticoat shorter, and it's easy to do. And with the waist ties on, it is time for the reveal. Now, unfortunately, this is the only footage I have of myself wearing the petticoat while pregnant. I'm slightly kicking myself for not getting photos while I was pregnant, but I was hoping to finish the pet and lair first, but as luck would have it, I didn't have time before my almost 11-pound baby decided to make his way into the world. I'm very glad that I have this clip, but I'm even more thrilled that he's finally here. And it is done! I am quite happy with how the petticoat came out, and I really love the feather quilting. I think it just looks absolutely beautiful, and yeah, it's definitely the favorite part of this petticoat for me. You may hear my little one off to the side, so this is gonna be quick. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye! This is completely crooked, isn't it? Oh man. My battery's dying on this camera. Sorry, but this one's also dying. Can you pause this? Oh my goodness, yep. We're roughly the same size. Okay, I think something I forgot to mention is how heavy this thing is. Oh my goodness. She's heavy.